The secret to creating the juiciest, tastiest pizza that has cheese that never slips off the top is to add glue. That's according to Google AI. Now, I'm sure you guys have probably seen a lot of the news and social media, loads of jokes and people kind of mocking Google Gemini after all of the major announcements that they've made recently. And it's coming up with ridiculous answers about all sorts of different things and, even offensive answers as well. And I think it's a little bit unfair to single Google out because the way it is being reported seems to suggest that it's a Google problem rather than an AI problem. But it is actually an AI problem because if you try to go back in time a little bit to 2023, when Microsoft were basically promoting Bing Chat, which was built around GPT, post, of course, the huge success of ChatGPT. And what happened then? It was doing pretty much the same. It was actually coming up with ridiculous answers, even offensive answers. And somebody was saying, I remember, that it was being really aggressive and so on. And Microsoft had to kind of pull back a little bit. So this isn't really, a surprising outcome from what we're seeing here. And the key reason is, of course, hallucinations. Now, if you've seen some of my previous videos, I always like to describe hallucinations as a way of AI miscalculating the answer, because that's all it is, my friends. AI does not have intelligence. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. There is no intelligence. The intelligence inside the AI models is the intelligence of the people who built the AI models. Effectively, they use their knowledge, their expertise in all sorts of different fields to build the AI model around that. But AI in itself doesn't generate intelligence out of nothing, right? It's not organic the way we do humans, or even the way your animals do. Like my cat can generate more intelligence than AI models, yeah? It is highly sophisticated statistical calculations. Basically, what it always tries to figure out is the probability of relevance between your question, your prompt, and the answer that it needs to generate. Yeah. And hallucinations basically is a glitch within that calculation. And it's the nature of the beast. I mean, there's absolutely no way out of it. And that's why, again, I've done that in my previous videos, is that if anybody tells you or tries to suggest that they have an AI model that never hallucinates, that's bullshit. I call out the bullshit. And in fact, I called out the bullshit of the company Rabbit even before they released it, because they were trying to claim, it seemed, though they didn't say it directly, but from all of the messaging that I've seen, that their LAM, the language actions model that they came up with, apparently they suggested that it never hallucinates. And I called this out. I said that's bullshit. There's no such a thing as AI that never hallucinates. And now that they've released it, oh my god, all of the major reviewers, MKBHD and CoffeeZilla especially, should check out CoffeeZilla's coverage of Rabbit. Absolutely, like, basically it's a scam, right? But pretty much, I think, if you check that video, you'll see specifically that this is the typical example of how tech bros try to promote and monetize from AI hype. Yeah. And that's why I always say to you guys, you got to be very, very careful with these claims. The reality is AI will always hallucinate no matter what. So what I would like to talk to you about is, how do you actually reduce the chances of hallucinations? Or can you even reduce the chances of hallucinations? The answer is yes, you can, but you can never eliminate it. Now, let's go back to the reasons why. And well, there are loads of reasons, but some of the key reasons, based on the work that we're doing, that we believe AI models hallucinate in this way. One of the key reasons is the fact that they always try to give you an answer no matter what. Yeah. I want you guys to try this if you haven't done this already. If you go to any chatbot, including ours, Nano, and you say to it, do not respond to my questions, guess what? It will still respond to your questions. If you say to it, can you please shut up? It will say, okay, I'll shut up. That's a response. It always tries to give you an answer. And in fact, one of the key features, I suppose, that GPT-4o, OpenAI seem to be trying to solve this particular problem, where effectively you can interrupt it, or you can stop it from providing you with an answer, right? If that makes sense. Now, whether they're going to solve it, I don't know. We will see. We're still going to do a lot of work on that. But generally speaking, because the AI is always trying to give you an answer, that already is the first step towards hallucinating. Because the second step is that if it doesn't have the right data or the knowledge around the questions that you're asking, and he's kind of trying to figure out, think of it like it's saying, oh, okay, I don't know what to say, I need to give an answer, I need to give an answer, so it just makes shit up. Basically, that's what happens. That's the first step, or the second step, towards hallucination. So that's one of the reasons why you see people talk about things like prompt engineering, where effectively you need to ask it the right questions so that it can give you the right answer. Which, by the way, that in itself suggests that there's no intelligence, because, when us humans, when we talk to one another, we don't prompt engineer our conversations, do we? Right? If you and I chat to one another, I'm not going to prompt engineer my questions or my conversations with you. We just chat, right? We just figure stuff out together, don't we? That's that's humanity. That's basically how our intelligence works. AI doesn't work in that way. Yeah. Though there's a lot of work that has been done in terms of allowing the AI to try and figure out the context of your question without you adding any effort into it. And that's in fact what we're doing with my company, in fact, but lots of other companies doing the same, because we try to make that interaction as natural as possible. But this is basically the two key steps that basically lead to hallucinations: not having the right data, but also not understanding the context of your question. So, based on those two key factors, the way you need to strategize in order to reduce the risk of hallucination within your AI deployment, whether it's for your project, your startup, your app, or whatever it is, there are three steps, I would say, because when you read around about this, there's so many different theories about what it is that you need to do to reduce hallucinations. And generally speaking, you find two schools of thoughts. Yeah. So there's one school of thoughts, which I think the big tech tend to believe in, is that you need to feed it as much data as you possibly can. So the bigger the data, the bigger the intelligence. And we've seen that, with all the coverage that we've seen, like in the last couple of weeks, with all of their announcements. And I made the point that it seems that they want to suck up more data. In fact, I think we are going to enter a new iteration of the big data hype again, because they believe in that. I think they seem to believe that the bigger the data, the more the intelligence. But there's an argument that says, well, actually, the bigger the data, the higher the chances of hallucinations. Now, they're both correct, but they're also incorrect, because the other school of thought suggests that if you provide it with specialized data only, it will not hallucinate. But that's not true. Again, we've seen this with our work, but loads of other studies have shown that, in fact, no matter how sophisticated or how clean or organized or specialized your data is, it will still hallucinate. And in fact, we've seen this happen in the past. If you follow the AI market, I think around November 2022, Meta released a language model called Galactica, which was built entirely on research papers, scientific research papers. So you would think, well, it doesn't get cleaner than that. Well, guess what? It was generating absolute garbage. It was completely losing the plot every single time. So there you go. So that is already one evidence that despite the fact that you've got clean data, you've got organized data, you still hallucinate, no matter how specialized it is. So the reality is, it's the nature of the beast, right? AI just hallucinates because sometimes it gets confused, it miscalculates the probabilities. You need to think of it from that point of view. How do you help it increase the probability of providing you with the right answer? And it all comes down to the context. Okay. So I suppose you can say that with my company, we are somewhat aligned with Anthropic. Anthropic, for example, they are quite bullish on the context. That's why at the time of the recording of this video, they provide the largest context window for their language models, way bigger than GPT. Because the idea behind the context is that you effectively helping the AI understand what it is that you wanted to do within the context of your application. Yeah. So, for example, with Nano, the context in our case, we want it to be emotionally intelligent and empathetic, which is, which I can tell you, it's a lot easier said than done, because effectively we try to build that context around it, that you need to be empathetic, you need to make the effort to try and understand the emotions of the user, and you try to basically help the user accordingly, right? Regardless of the conversation, regardless of the topics, you try to be as empathetic and as respectful as you possibly can, but also but have the emotional intelligence for you to try to understand the user through that conversation without the need for prompt engineering, right? That's the context, which is still pretty wide, but nonetheless, we're kind of helping it kind of focus on one particular way of behavior. But then we're providing it with a lot of data and indeed a lot of information in terms of what does emotional intelligence actually mean. So we've got our own interpretation because of my background in medical science, but also we're adding additional data from research papers, etc. So we're adding that extra layer of knowledge to help it guide itself into that right direction in terms of how it answers the questions. So this is the sort of thing that you've got to think about within your implementation. What is the context, and how do you add that context through, for example, with Anthropic or say on Azure GPT? There are loads of different ways that you can add the context within your model to make it effectively basically figure out the context of how it should reply to the user, and why should it reply in the way that it needs to reply. You have to effectively take it by the hand and guide it. Think of it in that way, right? I'm trying very hard not to be technical, because the whole point of this channel is that I want it to be as relevant and as understandable to as many people as possible. It's not designed only for technical people, but for non-technical people as well. So it's for everybody, because AI, my friends, is impacting every single person, right? It's not impacting people like myself or engineers or whoever. No, it's every single person. So I want every single person to have access to this information in a way that makes sense to them so that they can interact with AI and deploy AI safely and responsibly. So before I carry on, please help us grow this channel. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and together, what we aim to achieve is to make sure that AI serves us, not the other way around. Now, the second thing that you need to think about, of course, has to be the data. So think of it this way, picture it in your head. You've provided the context, so that's the first layer of knowledge, right? The first guardrails that you've put around the model to tame it down a little bit. But also, let's say if it's a business application, or if you try to add more specialized applications of your AI model, like let's say in our case with Nano, that specialism is emotional intelligence. So we've got our own data sets where we basically trained it on these data sets alongside the context. So it's like another guardrail, another layer of knowledge that you add on top of it to guide it further, right? Because if you ask it the question, what it's trying to do, again, it's trying to look into the data and say, okay, this is the information that is available to me. That's the probability of relevance. I'm going to produce that answer. So that's another thing. So you've got to absolutely provide good quality data. And this is not easy, I'm afraid, because with data, you have to make sure that if you, especially if you have existing data sets, if you've been a business running for a long time and basically you've built, a massive database of, I don't know, user data, behavioral data, that kind of stuff. Well, you can't just stick it as is. You have to cleanse it or pre-process it. You have to basically figure out what are the gaps within the data that your AI model might need. That means you might have to think about things like synthetic data. You might even have to add more new data sets that you haven't had before. So that's part of the data strategy that I always like to talk about, that the first step towards making sure that AI is successful is your data strategy and data audits. And that is a big part of that. And again, that's something that you absolutely need to prioritize before you even decide which AI model you go for. But let's assume you've got the data, you've pre-processed it, then you want to make sure that it is embedded into the model in addition to the context. And there are loads of ways of doing that. So I'm not going to get into that. If you've got your developers or you're working with companies, they should be able to help you with this. But the idea is that you've got this a second guardrail. And the third thing that I suggest you could do, now it's not industry standard. This is something that we do with Nano. This is kind of like, I suppose, our selling point with my company. But by no means we're the only company that does that. But I don't think many companies do this. And that is that you actually add an additional layer of another specialized language model. Now, in our case, it's kind of like a micro language model. We call it IQ, and we try to open source it. We're kind of working on this very slowly. You can keep an eye on that if you're interested. It's aiq.org, and you can put your email there in the waiting list if you're interested in this sort of thing. But the idea behind, we pronounce it IQ. The idea behind our IQ micro LLMs is to increase the IQ of the AI model, right? And what it is, basically, it is an additional language model that is specialized in very specific fields. So going back to Nano, it's specialized language model in human psychology, human behavior, and indeed emotional intelligence yet again. And the idea is that when the chatbot is interacting with the user, it goes into that language model first to try and retrieve the data that it needs and the knowledge that it needs, combined with the data sets that we add on top of that, or underneath it rather, and then combines that with a context, and then together it creates an answer that is as relevant as possible to the question, right? Now, it doesn't always work. I mean, this is highly experimental, but we have seen when we worked with our customers on using the same idea, so we're adding those 3 steps with our customers, it reduces the hallucination level pretty significantly. It still does not eliminate it. It tends to get really, really sensitive. Like sometimes if you add extra data sets that are not pre-processed properly, it gets a bit confused. It's kind of like, it literally, we like to call it internally, like it's a WTF effect. It's like literally it sees something, it's like, what in the hell is this? That doesn't make any sense. And you just starts panicking. So you've got to be very careful with that. But nonetheless, like when we added those 3 layers, right? So you've got the context that you can do quite easily already. It comes in with the language models, like the capabilities. You can do that at the server level. But then your data, this is where a lot of work would have to take place through your data scientists or third-party data scientists, whoever. And then on top of that, if you've got the capacity to do that and the ability to do that and indeed the funds to do that, then you can start deploying perhaps additional, more specialized language models to work alongside the foundational language model, right? And that seems to work for us so far, right? Touch wood. So it kind of works really well. Now, of course, language models evolve and the new language models emerge every day. I think according to Hugging Face, there's over 8,000 models out there right now. So by no means this is the only way forward, but this is what seems to work really well at our end, and I'm sharing that with you guys so that you can probably try it at your end as well using your own approach. If you've got another approach, feel free to comment. Let's share ideas, because that's the whole point. We want to make sure that everybody has the ability to deploy AI successfully. But going back to the point of hallucinations, this is absolutely has to be part of your strategy. Don't assume ever that the AI model that you're deploying, even if you're building your own AI model, that it will never hallucinate. Always make the assumption. And in fact, part of your AI audits and your AI planning has to involve mitigations against hallucinations. And these are the 3 steps that we use as a way of mitigating, but also at the same time, making sure that the AI model is as smart and as relevant as possible to the user. So that is really kind of, part of the gray area of the science of AI in terms of how it can operate and how you can make sure that it actually works as you would expect it to work. And indeed, I suppose Google, of course, they're saying that they're putting a lot of extra work into making sure that they try and tame Gemini down. Now, the issue with that, of course, I'm not sure how they're going to do that, because the problem that Google and indeed what Bing has, because it's live web data, it adds a bit of level of unpredictability. And I think I did say this in one of my very old videos, that one of the problems that AI models tend to have, that they're not very good at unpredictable environments. And actually a really good example of this is the self-driving cars. You see, self-driving cars, they work really, really well in a road that's filled with sensors and filled with other self-driving cars and nothing else. Because that way you can make them communicate with one another and they can work perfectly well. But if you're a driver like I am, you know very, very well that the real world, right? The roads are totally unpredictable. Especially, I mean, I live in the countryside. So when I drive in the countryside roads, my God, all sorts of weird things tend to emerge. The other day, I was driving and I saw this white thing sticking out of the bushes. And it looked round and I'm like, what the hell was that? From distance, it kind of, as an experienced driver, like you notice these sort of things. Of course, a car would never, sort of an AI within the car would never notice it whatsoever. It's just some white thing sticking out of the bushes. And as I drove closer, it was a sheep's butt. What, how, I have no idea, but don't ask any questions. But that's the kind of thing that AI will never be able to identify or predict. That is the problem. It's an unpredictable environment. AI models are very bad at that. All of them are pretty unreliable. Now, it'll be interesting to see how Google and Microsoft will be able to deal with that. But I think, the idea of AI powered search, that you have that sort of chat interface, I'm afraid that would increase any kind of probability of hallucinations because of the unpredictable aspects of search and indeed the data, because it's scraped from all over the web. it's filled up with a lot of garbage. And the thing about AI, first rule of AI is garbage in, garbage out. No matter how amazing your AI model is, if your data is garbage, the output is polished garbage. That's the fact. So it'll be good to see that. I mean, I think they'll crack it. Obviously, they've got the resources to do it and so on. But even like, for example, if you want to deploy live search with your chatbot, I would actually recommend that you actually don't make it automatically search the web. I know some startups are doing it; they're automatically searching the web. Yeah, I mean, I think the hallucination risk is still there. I mean, unless they found a way around it. I mean, we found a way around it where you actually make it more into a function or a command. So you basically say to it, "Oh, look, I want you to search the web." And if you do that, it will search the web. If you don't, it won't. And that's the idea. Remember what I said earlier, that if it sees some kind of unpredictable data set that came out of nowhere, it can potentially get confused. Sometimes it doesn't. Actually, most of the times it doesn't in sort of in the enterprise environment, because it's much more protected. But as we test it and we do our own R&D, it kind of messes up sometimes. The current public version of Nano, the companion, at the moment it doesn't search the web. Like we try to update it as regularly as we possibly can, but it's not live web because of that key issue. But we're working around it. But that's something like you guys need to kind of think about if you're deploying it. If you're using live data, you need to be very careful how your AI model can behave with that data set. But anyway, that's my general thoughts on this. So I hope this was helpful. Just again, just sharing ideas here with you guys. And I think, it'll be interesting to see where we go with this with Google. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny jokes, all sorts of, social media, isn't it? But yeah, but it will be interesting to see how they're going to fix that. And again, if you guys have any questions, as usual, feel free to comment below. And also make sure you follow me on LinkedIn. We get into a lot of interesting conversations and discussions on LinkedIn, and people DM me directly as well. So you're very welcome to do that. Again, all the links are in the description below. Until the next time, my friends, enjoy yourself with AI. Stay safe. Speak to you soon. Peace.